And so with that, let's introduce our presenters to you. We are very happy to be joined by Kelly Osborne. Kelly is a community manager and web developer in the Office of Innovation at the National Archives. Prior to joining the archive, she was a web developer for the publishers of The Atlantic and Science, as well as the Smithsonian's American Art Museum. Thank you for joining us today, Kelly. We're also joined by Darren Cole. He is a community manager and digital engagement specialist in the Archives Office of Innovation. In addition to HistoryHub, he's supported a number of Archives online projects, including today's document, and that shares the Archives holdings from that date in history across multiple social media channels. In between other projects, he enjoys developing animated GIFs from NARA's wide array of holdings for the National Archives Giphy channel. Did I pronounce that correctly, Darren? I'm going to hope so.
I like to say GIF, but I don't think there's an official ruling on that.
I'm pretty sure it's GIF.
You're very kind. And then rounding out the trio is Rebecca Collier, and Rebecca serves as the Research Services HistoryHub coordinator. She has more than 35 years of experience in archival reference, having worked in textual reference at the National Archives since 1985. In her time at the National Archives, she's authored and edited several award-winning archival finding aids and records guides. Although she has knowledge about many of the records in the custody of the National Archives, she has the most expertise in 20th century military topics, especially those pertaining to World War II and the Korean War. So thank you very much for joining. We really appreciate it. And with no further ado, we're going to turn it over to you all to tell us a little bit more about HistoryHub.
Thanks. So I'm Kelly Osborne, and I've never given a WebEx presentation. So if I start to screw anything up, somebody please stop me before I just continue. All right, so let me try sharing my. All right, can everyone see my screen?
We can. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Tammy. Okay, we're so thrilled to be talking with all of you about our project, HistoryHub. HistoryHub is a crowdsourcing platform for people who are interested in researching history and genealogy. And we think of history in kind of a broad sense, like it could be military records of personal history. It could be something more specific, like a historical event, but so history and genealogy in a very broad sense. When you go to, the URL is history.gov, and when you go there, we have it kind of modeled on a Google ideal, where there's basically like your main focus is asking a question and finding answers. We also have a number of blog posts, like recent blog posts that help people figure out how to research our records. You can see some of our recent questions and different communities that we have, including one of a community that features the Library of Congress. They're kind of our federal cousins, and we have them. They're on HistoryHub as well. We have spaces that are kind of separated by topic. Oh, and also I should say, I have a number of dogs, and I just heard like one of the dogs in the background start to stir. So if I suddenly go quiet, it's because I'm trying to keep you all from hearing them barking. So HistoryHub it's a platform where people can get answers from multiple sources. The answers are crowdsourced, but there's also archivists who are on it. We foster a community of citizen experts who can help answer questions. And it's a knowledge base that scales and improves in quality over time. It's also the result of ongoing research into how organizations communicate with and serve their audiences. We've been researching this for about at this point, maybe 5 or 6 years. So it's based on trends in consumer research. The back end is powered by the same platform as the Apple support community. So as an example, my laptop started making this really weird noise. It was this like hideous beeping noise, and I didn't know how to fix it. So of course I did what people usually do. I Googled it and I typed in, why is my laptop making this weird beeping noise? This is comparable to a research question on HistoryHub. And I came up with someone who had asked that exact same thing on the Apple support community. My MacBook Pro is making a beeping sound. This researcher, this person who asked the question is comparable to a researcher, and they have this very common problem. So you can see that someone from the community answered the question, and this was exactly what I needed to know. They also had some follow-up information that was helpful and didn't show up in my original search. So this is like HistoryHub. You can ask a specific question. You can get an answer sometimes within minutes. You can get answers from people who are knowledgeable, the citizen experts. And this is the part that's the best. The answer is then available to anyone who Googles a similar research question. And this paradigm that is really set by technology companies is setting user expectations. They want to be able to ask a specific question, get help immediately. They want to be able to ask follow-up questions, and they want to be able to search and find an answer easily. So this is kind of the way HistoryHub works. When somebody types in, how do I apply for a lost honorable discharge, they'll, that information is on our website as well, but because of the way Google indexes sites, because HistoryHub is updated constantly, and because it uses words that the public uses, the search results are often higher. Here you can see as well, when people type in, how do I get my DD 256, which is a certificate of honorable discharge that the archives holds. It is not only the top result, but it's also, there's similar information. That's one of its, what's that called? It's like a featured snippet, or we are the top result for a number of different topics, like how many women voted in 1920, and whether or not, like, people will sometimes search and find out, how do I find out if my grandfather was one of the Tuskegee Airmen? So some of the problems that HistoryHub can solve. NARA answers questions on a one-to-one basis through email, phone, and people walking in the door. Very, like, a lot. We get a lot of volume. We had over 38,000 research questions come through NARA's website in the last year, and almost 200,000 written research requests. We answer similar questions again and again. So for example, here you have someone who's asking about naval records. What he's looking for is Navy deck logs, which are really popular records at the National Archives, but he doesn't know, excuse me, he doesn't know to use the words Navy deck logs. So we have Becky here, our main HistoryHub coordinator, who points him in the right direction. Sometimes NARA can't provide a complete answer because the questions could be about records held elsewhere. So here you have someone who thinks that the Civil War service and medical records should be at the National Archives, which honestly is, I think, a reasonable assumption. And one of our archivists, that's so funny, I just realized that person's last name is the same as mine. Anyway, one of our National Archives experts points them toward where the records will be at the National Park Service. Here you can see someone who's asking about finding naturalization records. This is really a very popular question. people assumed that the National Archives would have it, and we have some, but these records in particular are at the New Mexico State Records Center. Sometimes researchers can't find what they're looking for because they make mistakes or like typos or misunderstandings. This is someone who's looking for information on Marcy Gravy, and they're pretty sure it's some kind of gravy name, but it's the totally wrong name, and it's no wonder they can't find any information. So Becky very seamlessly points them to the Marcus Garvey papers that are in universities and Library of Congress, and also the National Archives. Sometimes knowledge and experience can be held by experts from other institutions. So we have people from the Library of Congress who are involved in HistoryHub, involved in answering questions. We always joke, if you're calling in from DC, you totally get this, but nobody knows the difference between like the National Archives and the Library of Congress, and sometimes we get confused by the Smithsonian, and we kind of feel like the public doesn't like they shouldn't have to know the difference. They just want to get their information. So the Library of Congress will answer questions. We also have, especially for the genealogy questions, sometimes genealogists have been doing this for like decades. They've been researching their own genealogy records, and they're really just so they're just experts at this point. So you can see that somebody asked a question about naturalization records, and another citizen expert responds. So our goals, primarily to facilitate research and connect with new audiences. Our main goal is to make things easier for the public. Also to enable contributions from other institutions and subject matters of all types. We're interested in creating a knowledge base that continually improves. And we're also always interested in improving our customer service, and particularly for an audience that's getting more accustomed to immediacy. And this is probably our main goal, decreasing the workload for our own archivists over time. One of the great things about HistoryHub is that it allows us to respond to this kind of changing world environment. It removes the barriers of physical location for research and enables remote staff and experts to serve the public without having to interact with them. All right, some of the lessons learned. So it's important to adapt the current workflows to new technologies, and this can be really challenging. When you have new technology, it can be very disruptive, but it can also lead to greater efficiencies. It's important to work collaboratively with less bureaucracy. So if you have maybe a top-heavy approach to communicating with the public, that tends to work less well in a platform like this. The partnerships between internal offices are key. We always say that that like everyone working together is just vital. And additionally, it's great when you can determine the best division of labor and play to your strengths. So we really leave all decisions about reference and archival issues. We leave that to our colleagues in the archive section. So some of our growth, you can see that our the cumulative use has been pretty strong. We launched in 2016, and our projected numbers this is our projected numbers for 2020, but I suspect that they're going to be higher. You can see that the web traffic is growing as well, especially the more information we have available, the more people will be looking at it and for it. And then this is the thing that excites us the most, is that as we have over the last year, you can see that the number of questions has stayed approximately consistent, but the number of emails that we've gotten through the Contact Us form on our website has gone down. We expect to see that continue to go down. And we think that the reason why it's going down is because when people Google their questions, because they don't go to the archives, they don't go to your website first to find the information, they go to Google first. So you can see that, that the Google search on the site is high. Oh, can this work for you? Our security is FedRAMP certified, and since this is a government group, you probably all know what FedRAMP certified means. It basically just means that it's really secure. It meets federal security standards. Beyond that, all of the posts are moderated and PII is removed. Sometimes there will be a question that is not really a question, but more of a rant. And so we will decline to post those. The reference staff, any staff can also use group accounts to protect their own privacy. You can use group accounts, or you can use your personal, like an account associated with your name. It's really whatever you decide. Getting started is really easy. We don't need a MOU, which is a memo of understanding or agreement for any kind of partner institutions, because participation is open to everyone. But we can, if you're from a government institution, give you an expert badge that will identify you as an expert. We can easily post your FAQs as questions. This is a really great low-risk way to get started, or you can write a blog post to highlight something that's more complicated or information that the public has been asking about. So we can work with you to experiment on the platform for a short-term pilot. So here you can see one of our colleagues from the Utah State Archives and Record Service. They gave us a little icon of Utah, and they're using that as their expert. If you hover over it, it says expert. Here's an example of an FAQ. So we just kind of churned out these questions that come up frequently through that get emailed to us or that are on our website, but for some reason people aren't finding them. You can see that it has thousands of views answering the question before it comes to us. I always kind of liken it to when your information on your website is sort of like the manual, like if something goes wrong with your phone and you know that the information is in the book that they give you when you buy your phone, but nobody ever reads that book. In fact, I don't even think they give you a book anymore. I think they just kind of, I think it's just expected you're going to Google it. But here we have one of our colleagues posted about the Record Explorer group, this project that they were working on, and it got almost 80,000 views in less than 5 months. So it can get a lot of views. And here you can see the Library of Congress. They have a section where they do all their communication with, or a lot of their communication with their transcribers. They have blog posts and FAQs, and people can ask questions like, please reopen this page, or like, how do you transcribe something that is difficult to transcribe. So now I'm going to turn, oops, sorry about that, Darren. I'm going to turn this over to Darren, who's going to give you a demo.
Kelly. And while you all are switching gears, I just wanted to let you know that we have over 180 folks who have joined us to hear about what History Hub is up to. And we're just really excited to hear from you all. We did get a couple of questions in the chat, and I figured this might be a good point to kind of talk about it. So I think Randy has been doing some research on military records, and there's a DD 256 and a DD 214 and a DD 215. And we just wanted to see if we could set the record straight on what these forms are. Is that possible?
That would be a Becky question. I'm like,
yeah. Oops. Okay.
Becky, what's the difference between a DD 256 and a 214?
And a 215.
Well, the difference is actually the 214, DD 214 has the most information in it. And a lot of times when people are requesting records, they don't want to have the entire file or need it. And sometimes because if the record's burned in the fire of 1973, we don't necessarily have enough information to really put in a DD 214. So people get a certificate of honorable discharge instead, which is the DD 256. Also, that is used for people that are in the reserves. And a 215 helps you correct things that are in your DD 214. So that's a really quick explanation of it. And I think other people have put about the same information.
We'll take it. I think Randy's happy with it. Thank you so much. And this is just a reminder to folks that if you have questions, please pop them into the chat. This is a great opportunity to go straight to the folks who have the answers. So we'd love to hear from you. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Darren.
Great, thanks, Tammy. Yeah, I think just pop any questions you have in the chat box, and we'll get to them if we can. And if it's more of an actual historical record question, then please feel free to go over to HistoryHub and ask those directly. And then your answers will be out there for anyone else to view as well. So I'm just going to give a quick tour just around the platform itself, so you kind of get a sense of how it actually works. As Kelly has shown the homepage, you've got some basic navigational links at the top. You've got your Ask Your Question box down at the bottom, which is sort of the front and center for users. And then when you actually come to log in or register, you've got your sign in and register links in the upper right-hand corner. And we won't go into that in too much depth, but if you would like to sign up, just click the register button and it'll send you a confirmation email to your account of choice. And then you just need to click that confirmation link and finish filling out your account. On the lower half of the homepage, we just feature some recent blog posts. There's a feed of recent and more popular content, some of the more popular questions that we get, and then a list of all of our various research communities. And as Kelly mentioned, those are kind of broken down by rough topic area. And some of the more popular ones include expected things like military records, genealogy, women's rights, African-American records, and American Indian records, legislative records, et cetera. And then the big one is researchers' help, which is sort of a catch-all for any questions that don't really fall into the other major buckets. And if you were to drill down, this is what one of the communities looks like. This is the genealogy community. And so you get a feed of the most recent genealogy questions or recent genealogy answers that pop up. And on the right-hand side, what we have is some featured content. So that might be more recent blog posts or some of the really common questions that we get really frequently. And the blog posts, Kelly kind of illuminated these a little bit, but they really help you dig into a particular topic. So if we have certain, again, like alien files or passenger arrival lists, certain topics that you can't cover just in a simple question and answer, but really want to dive into more detail, we can put those there, and those still get really high search results off Google. So it's a great way to sort of expose some of that more hidden content that you have. And searching the site, when you come to the homepage, a user, in sort of a best case scenario might come in and start typing in their question, and the system automatically will predict and suggest potential questions and answers for them. So if they start typing in their question, where can I find my naturalization records, or naturalization records in general, not just theirs, but then it will come back with some suggested existing questions and answers that are already on the site. And ideally, one of those questions and answers will actually answer the user's question, and they won't have to post that question at all. They'll get their answer immediately, and they'll have their question answered, and we won't have to respond to sort of another duplicative question. So you start typing your question, the answers appear, and then you click one of those, and it will take you to the full question and answer post. And it will ask them, is this what you were looking for? You can no, take me back, or I want to do a deeper search. You can click either of those links to either, and there's a more in-depth searching mechanisms that I won't go into detail right here, but there are other ways to search the site as well and sort of filter information based on recency and which community you're searching, et cetera. And if you actually were to get to the point of asking a question, again, you would start typing your question in the box, and you would have to log in first. We don't have any anonymous content. All users have to create an account before they post anything. That just kind of cuts down on spam and troll posts and things like that. You create your account, you type your question, and then you click the ask button, and then it takes you to the question screen where it has a standard WYSIWYG interface that most users don't have any issue with, and they can type out their question in detail. And then we give them some additional tips on how to better construct a good question. You want a succinct title. You want to have key details. This in particular is for like a genealogy type question. It's really helpful for us to know who you're researching. What information do you already know about them? Where do they live? When do they live? Also, like, where have you already searched? So we don't, repeat information that maybe you already have. If you have any helpful images or links. And again, like we like to remind them, please don't include any personal, PII or personal information. Occasionally people will try to post social security numbers and things like that. Everything on the site is moderated. So a lot of this information is sometimes, if they do include it, will often be filtered out by our moderators. But it's more helpful to not include it at all in advance. They can add images. Maybe there's a particular census record that they're having trouble decrypting. They can put it there, and the other users kind of help them kind of piece that out. And it gives you the option of which community you want to post it in. Everything by default will go to researchers' help unless you select one of the other communities, such as, again, genealogy or military records, et cetera. And again, questions get moderated in the order they come in. Depending on the input, it may take a day or two based on volume. And again, federal agency, so there's no moderation currently over weekends or holidays. And again, questions could be edited for clarity or to remove PII. Sometimes Becky will edit a question title just to make it more easy to read for other users. And we have a help and technical support area, and that really just covers sort of the more common questions that users might have, not specific history questions, but how to use the site. How do I unsubscribe? How do I post a question? Why did my question get rejected? We do, on rare occasions, reject questions. Again, it doesn't really come up too often, but sometimes the question might be a duplicate. Sometimes it may violate our terms of service, which we try to be very upfront about with users about what they can and can't post. And so again, it really doesn't come up too often, but it occasionally comes up and users would like to know why. So we just make sure and put that out in detail. So again, we're really encouraging other agencies, if you're in the type of public reference work that we also do here at the archives, we really encourage you to check out the site in more depth and sign up. Again, participation is open to anyone. You can get on our list of interested partners and submit your FAQs as sort of a question and answer format to get it more Google exposure. You could write a blog post about a more detailed topic. You can help answer the existing questions and help answer new questions. Just because an existing question has already been answered doesn't mean there isn't more information to provide out there. So we're always looking for your input and help. So we'd love it if you could join us. You can check out the site at history.gov. And if you're interested in more details on partnership opportunities, please email us at historyhub@nara.gov.
Well, Darren, I think that at least one individual on the webinar or in the webinar has questions about participating with HistoryHub. So are there different levels of involvement for participating institutions? Is that something that you can discuss?
It's not something we've done in too much depth. Generally, our biggest partner right now is Library of Congress, and they're fairly involved, but we're happy to discuss it in more detail if they'd like to contact us. We'd love to talk more.
Okay, great. So we've got the email address there in case, Eliza, you want to follow up. We do have another question relating to A files. And so I think that this is a file that's associated with immigration, perhaps. And so can you talk a little bit more about what A files are and whether more than one can be requested at a time, or whether someone would have to use a linker to request files individually?
That's going to be more of a Becky question, and that would also be a great question for them to ask directly on HistoryHub.
Got it.
Yeah. So I am not a genealogist or a naturalization subject matter expert. I usually ask our SHME or our subject matter expert, who is Elizabeth Burns. From what I understand, though, an A file, a lot of the naturalization records, it really depends on what court everything was done through. And so sometimes A files can be attached to them. So I can't tell you, you can put them all in one request because it may have to go to several different places. There are headquarter records that are in DC, and they include some of the A1, A files, but I really think, it really depends on where the naturalization took place.
Okay.
So we would say this would be a great question to ask on HistoryHub.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Randy, if you're not a member of that community, it sounds like this could be a great place to post that question. And speaking of communities, I'm curious, you mentioned that you get something along the lines of 38,000 questions via the website per year, and a total of 192,000 written requests. Are there any communities that you see as having more traffic than others, or places where you see a tremendous growth or spike in activity recently? Anything that you can share?
Well, we get the most requests. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. You get the most requests for military records. And that can include anything from my grandfather was in the military and I know what unit he was in or what ship he was on, or I need, I don't know anything. And so we refer them to St. Louis to get what they can. And so the military community is actually the busiest. The next one is the genealogy community. And of course, that includes anything that we have records for or we don't have records for, because people don't really care. They just want an answer. They want an answer to their request. So that's why you've seen a lot of referrals to other places, because we try to help people as best we can, especially for vital records that NARA doesn't have and other things. And so that's the other community that's pretty busy.
Thank you. Do you see any sort of seasonal upticks in different communities, just historically? For instance, I'm trying to think of a good example. I wonder if there, but I wonder if there are sort of changes that you see associated with, like maybe you see an uptick in the request for military information around things like Memorial Day or Veterans Day or something like that. Have you noticed anything like that?
Well, the one uptake we did have, and we set up a separate community for it. It was for the celebration of women getting the right to vote. So we set up a special community for that, just to have all the questions go into one place.
And our growth
Thank you.
has been pretty pretty strong. So it's a little bit difficult because every month is an uptick.
And you all launched in 2016, right?
Correct.
Yes.
That's great. Okay. Well, we do have a question. DARA IT would like to know how many staff are currently involved and dedicated in the History Hub project.
Well, since we're all teleworking, there's 6 of us who are dedicated to working on HistoryHub. But normally, I'm the only full-time person. And we have loanees from other parts of the agency that assist. And I do usually have an intern. And her last day was last week.
So you handle, that's a lot of requests that, you know, a small team handles. And it's great that you have a community that sort of helps with, you know, sharing information with folks who are coming in to History Hub based on their experience.
Yes, and we contact people throughout NARA who have an expertise also. Not that they'll tell us what they know, and then we put that as part of their, the response.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I would say, again, I would just remind folks that this is a great opportunity to pop your questions into chat. We would love to raise those to Kelly and Darren and Rebecca, if we can do that. What would you say is one of the most, oh, well, we do have a question here. Dora would like to know my experience. Dora would like to say my experience with the extended network of History Hub is outstanding. Great research and service.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dora. That means a lot to us.
So what? Yeah, that's nice. So what would you say for each of you, what has been one of the most exciting aspects of working on this type of initiative? Would you say that this sort of platform is something that NARA has been accustomed to providing to the public, or was this at the time of launch, was this fairly new? You know, what has that looked like?
I mean, Kelly has done a lot of the initial research into this, but I would say, I think early on, this was a fairly new approach to certainly, humanities research, but, certainly in the tech world, this has sort of been an established paradigm. So it's sort of exciting to see that model transfer into this different environment and just kind of see the possibilities open up.
And I would say Darren and I both have long felt that we have, as part of our role at the National Archives, we have this almost patriotic duty to let people have access to their records, to do whatever we can to make things, make access happen, to make things easy for the public. So it's been rewarding to be able to try to meet the public where they are.
That's great. We do have a question about whether or not History Hub has a potential benefit in the educational sector. Do you know of any projects that have involved different school systems, districts, any educational institutions?
We have had a couple of teachers just say that they are interested in giving their kids access to primary source material. So they'll ask on History Hub. I think we had one recently that was like, what documents can you point me to help me teach the kids about civil rights? Because, especially now, they're in this kind of new paradigm where there's a lot of, like, everyone's a homeschooler now. Everyone's looking for source material that they can find online. And it can be overwhelming. It can be hard to find. The National Archives has a lot of programs where they reach out specifically to teachers. So it's great to be able to point people in those directions. As far as school districts, we don't have school districts, but we do get a lot of kids who will who will ask us questions. And I saw this really interesting talk one time. Some of our NASA colleagues were asking, somebody asked them, how do you feel about people asking you science questions on Twitter? And it's clear that like these are kids who want some help with their homework. And the NASA people said, we kind of see it as we're doing science outreach, that we're helping to create an interest in science and you know, make people feel like this is a like attainable. Science knowledge is attainable to them. And this is kind of how we feel about the National Archives and our information. Sometimes we're like, kid, use Google, but for the most part, Becky is incredibly generous at answering reference questions for kids.
Great. Well, Dara says great work with very valuable experience. One question, and I think you spoke to this earlier to some extent, is about your collaboration with parts of NARA. Like if you get a question about Jimmy Carter, do you contact the library? And how do folks get involved to answer questions related to President Carter, for instance?
Well,
so I guess if we're, go ahead.
Well, what we try to do is look and see, first of all, what's in our catalog, the National Archives catalog. And also we look on their website. And if it's a specific question that we can't answer, then we will contact one of our colleagues at the Jimmy Carter Library. But other than that, we try to respond as much as we can without contacting someone, so that we can allow them, the whole purpose of HistoryHub is to try to take care of their reference load and to help with their reference load. And so if I can point someone to the right series or the right records that would be a Jimmy Carter, or maybe not a Jimmy Carter, but somewhere else, then that's what we do.
Okay. So I guess if someone did want to help in answering questions about Jimmy Carter, they could go to HistoryHub and create an account and look in some of those forums, correct? I mean, I think that there is a community section that's devoted to presidential records, if I'm not mistaken. So that might be one way in which they might be able to contribute as well. Okay.
There is, but if they're from an official Jimmy Carter institution, they should feel free to contact us, and we can help point them to questions that have already been asked, and also get them the official, get them an expert badge.
Sounds good. Yeah. Well, I know that we do have at least one official reference archivist on the call, and she from the Vietnam Center and Archive at Texas Tech, who says most of our research requests come from Vietnam veterans or their families, and our materials don't always have the information they need. Would it be appropriate for me to post the question in HistoryHub on their behalf, or should I remove myself and recommend they post their own request?
You can do either way.
Yeah, either way.
Usually the requester knows more about the question and what they're looking for than if you would post it yourself. And so, it's really up to you. And if they feel that they can post it on their own, that's fine. If you would do it for them, that's fine as well.
Got it. I do want to circle back on that question about the Carter Library. Yes, that was an official archivist from the Carter Library. So, so we have at least 2 official archivists on the call. Thank you for your question, Sarah. So John mentions that he's been using NARA records to help students research local history, going back to some of the discussion we had on educational benefits, and in particular, Civil War military pension records. Will those be available through HistoryHub, or is digitizing them at all possible?
Well, the records themselves won't be on HistoryHub. We'll connect the researcher to where it is in the catalog if they've been digitized. And I know that some records are digitized and others aren't. So it really depends on whether our partners have digitized it and then we've gotten the images back. If that particular state, the pension file was microfilmed, it's most likely that it is digitized somewhere. But if not, we have what's called the hub, innovation hub at the main building in DC, and they welcome people to walk in and make copies of records that really matter to them. And the pension files are one of those kinds of records.
Thank you for that. So Jesse does add that Innovation Hub is slowly digitizing CMSR and pensions records. So thank you for that, Jesse. We appreciate that. One question is about data and content on HistoryHub and how or if it's indexed by web search engines such as Google.
Yes, that was, again, if you remember back early on, Kelly covered that in our growth, that because HistoryHub is a regularly updating site, it ranks higher in Google search index. So that's how come we can get much higher results on our content. Even our more popular questions will even show up frequently as Google featured snippets, so that the site is indexed exceedingly often by Google.
Great, thank you for that. Do you all happen to know, this is a question from one of the folks in the chat, do you all happen to know if USCIS is currently processing or fulfilling requests for information at present time? Or is that really a question that's best targeted to them?
It's probably best to look on their website to see what they're doing.
Okay.
Every federal agency is kind of limited right now, and I'm not sure what they're able to do.
Thank you for that. So we do have another comment. This is awesome. As the African American Community Archivist and Librarian at the Austin History Center at the Austin Public Library, I just signed up and posed my own question to test this out. I will be including this in my genealogy webinars and one-on-one sessions. So thank you for that, Black Community Archivists. That's great. Yeah. So any other questions from the community? Yeah, we've got one. Michelle asks, what search engine optimization does the team do on content on history.gov? Do you review site search or customer feedback and optimize for different wording by the public?
Most of what we do is handled by the platform itself. We do go into, I go into Google Search Console just to make sure that the site is being indexed regularly. But pretty much we let the content do the work for itself. Everything comes in as people have written it, so it already features highly in terms of sort of plain language and common terms that someone else might actually be using.
Although for internal search, we do, because certain words mean the same thing, like, Darren, do you have an example, like naturalization and something?
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely, there's basically a backend thesaurus, and you can link certain common phrases and terms together so that when someone searches on the site itself, it will link those together. So, for example, World War II. So you might have WW2, WWII, there's any number of permutations. And so we have all those entered. So if someone just searches on World War II, most of those versions will pop up.
Thank you for that. I think the crowd is warming up with their questions now, which is great. So West Tech wants to know, if we notice that a source that is recommended by HistoryHub is incomplete, how can we submit a suggestion to use a different source?
Just post a reply.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we can.
We're pulling one up. That's great. There it is. Um, can you talk a little bit more about how the History Hub platform was developed? Was it something that you all created in-house, or was it existing software or an existing software application that you used? And I guess along those lines, how long did it take you to actually stand it up once you got into that? Um, once you started down that path?
The hardest part is the research into like all the stuff that goes into to a project like this, figuring out um, all the things that you do before you do anything. So that was the most extensive part. We didn't write any software ourselves. That's that's a that's an interesting question that feels like it comes from someone who's been in the government for a long time, because it's a shifting target, right? Like for a while, a lot of the software that we used was things that the government created. And then it's very hard to sustain your own software. So this was on um, the tail end of that kind of discussion. It's the same software that's used by Apple, although I'm sure that theirs is highly customized and ours is more just out of the box. And we don't have a lot of customization. And honestly, we're not wedded to the platform itself. What we're most interested in is this idea of digital reference.
Mhm. All right, thank you for that. Appreciated. Um, Lisa Moore says she really appreciates this resource. As a reference archivist, she says she sometimes gets questions from older folks who don't have computers. So she sees using this for her own reference requests at work, as well as recommending it to her constituents who are looking for things that we don't have. So thank you for that feedback, Lisa. We appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great.
So it looks like there's a question here from Tom. Tom, are you representing Inside Technology? Let us know if you are. He has a question about scanners used to scan the large format ledger type documents and how those are converted from microfilm or microfiche. And that might be a question that we have you email the team directly for follow up. And their email address is historyhub@nara.gov. So maybe you can just shoot them a note and they can respond to you via email. Thank you for that question, Tom. So many pieces of data that you all must have to at your disposal. I mean, is there any sort of count, estimate, or record of how many pieces of data the archives kind of have and store and maintain?
The page count that gets thrown around is usually in the billions, so it's hard to. And then once you start factoring in electronic records, then I'm sure it's goes through the roof after that.
Yeah, and it is known as the public's record, right? The resources that the archives have. And so I will say this, we're happy to hear that there are folks like you all and teams like you all helping to manage that record and make it accessible to so many. We really appreciate it. We're kind of coming up on the hour. So I thought I would turn it over to you, Kelly, Rebecca, Darren, to see if you have any last thoughts or comments that you'd like to offer before we close this session.
Yeah, well, our main goal, something Darren and Becky and I have always wanted was to encourage other agencies to get involved and answer questions and help the public get the information they need. They don't always know where to go, and they don't always use the words that will get them to the information that they need, which is why we want to make sure that we are able to serve the public, and to serve the public to the best of our abilities is a collaborative effort.
I can't say it better than Kelly did, so I'm going to leave it at that.
I agree too. We're here to provide as much information as we can, and if the archives doesn't have it, then to point people to where they might be able to find it. And that is basically our mission.
Well, thank you so much for joining. We have so many folks who are coming away with something new. And so that's always a sign of a very helpful event. Again, we encourage you all to go check out history.gov and to email the HistoryHub at NARA.gov team for more information.